Hi everyone, this is Miss Riley. So today we're going to go over what you have in your boxes and bins, and we're also going to go over your first glass cuts. Now, please remember that when you are doing this, safety first, always safety. And with that in mind, let's get into your box. So this is what your box should look like. And when you get into the box, you want to make sure that the first thing you find is your safety glasses. So safety glasses are required in class, and this is generally what they're going to look like. Now, if you have regular glasses, that is okay. You do not actually have to wear these over the top. You just need to make sure that there is something that is covering your eyeballs in order to make sure that you're safe. So that you're going to find in your box. I do not want these back. These actually belong to you. They're part of your class fee. So that is one of the things that you want to make sure you have. Another thing that you want to make sure that you have is Band-Aids. Now, it turns out that I just found out in a handful of my boxes that the Band-Aids did not get put in. So you want to make sure that you go get some yourself, because it turns out glass cuts, even though they're generally really minor, they tend to bleed a lot, and nobody wants to have to clean up your blood. So make sure that you have Band-Aids with you. So thinking safety in mind, those are two things that I want to make sure that you have. Now, there are at least two other items that I want you to have with you as well when you get into class. And one of those would be shoes on your feet. The reason that you need shoes on your feet is because there is a high likelihood of little pieces of glass that are going to get kind of scattered. And if you don't have shoes on your feet, you're more likely to cut your foot in the process. So you want to make sure that you have shoes on your feet. Those are required every day when you come to class. The other thing that is a good plan is to make sure that you have some kind of towel or blanket underneath your working surface. And that way you can quickly pick that towel up and then put it in a bag and kind of shake it out to make sure no glass is kind of getting loose and away from you, because you do not want to cut yourself. So I want to make sure that you are placing your towel on the ground underneath you in order to protect, one, your flooring, and then two, those little particles that might get loose. So you want to make sure that that is down there as well. So those are the major things that when we're thinking about personal safety that we need to make sure that we have when we get started. So glasses, Band-Aids, shoes on our feet, and something underneath us to protect the surface area and for us to pick up glass quickly if we need to. So those are a handful of things that you need. Another item that you're going to look for is you're going to have something like this in your box. Now, inside of here, there will be 3 to 4 tools. It kind of depends if the people before you had the tools inside the box or if they got all put back in here. So one of them you're going to look for is this. This is a glass cutter. Now, a glass cutter, they sound incredibly dangerous, don't they? Well, as far as it going across your skin, it will not hurt you. But you do need to keep in mind this particular item can score any windows that you have. It could score a TV, it could score your phone, it will score glass. And that means to put a small crack in it. And so you want to make sure that you are not using it on any kind of item that, you don't want it to be used on, namely the glass inside the box. And I do have, every year I have a student that decides that they're an idiot and that they are going to score their phone because they want to see what happens. Well, let me tell you what happens. It shatters your phone. Your phone is under pressure. Any kind of scratch that goes across it is going to cause a shatter on your phone. So please make sure that you are not leaving these out for little hands to get a hold of. This is your glass cutter. Another item that you are going to have in your box is you're going to have running pliers. So these are running pliers. And when you're looking at running plier, you want to see this kind of, it's a little frown. So this bottom plate has a little bit of a curve to it. And that is the side. So you always want the frown facing down. And then there should be a black line that goes across the top where kind of like where the nose is. So if you don't have that, what you would do is you would take a look at it directly. You would make sure that you have the little frown that I'm talking about. And then you would take a Sharpie and run it across the top, just like mine has right here. And that way you would always know that that little line is supposed to be on the top surface of a score line that you would make in glass when you're breaking it. Because if you accidentally get it turned upside down, so you almost have the smile, what happens when you go to press on that score line is it shatters, but not in a good way. It shatters all over the place. So you want to make sure It is frown facing down with the nose sitting on the top. So make sure that you have marked it with a Sharpie. Sharpie happens to be one of those items that I told you you would need to purchase. So make sure that you have a Sharpie with you, a black Sharpie. The other item that I told you you need to purchase is you needed to purchase glue. So if you haven't done so, you need both of those items for any kind of project in glass. So these are your running pliers. You also are going to have a Grosine plier. So Grosine pliers, they have no plastic on the top, they're just metal. And when we're using Grosine pliers, we want to use them crocodile smile up. So I always say that this inner thing right there, that looks like a crocodile to me. So you want it to sit just like that when you're using them. And they are used to break glass. Running pliers break straight cuts, where these ones are going to break more complicated cuts, and we use them in a different way. So Grosine pliers, you want to make sure that you have those. And then either in the little glass cutting toolkit or in your box, you're going to have nippers. Now your nippers may have little rounded edges just like this one. And you want to make sure that the little blades are tight. They're not going to cut you. They're not like that kind of blade, but you want to make sure that they're tight. If they're loose, you will need to tighten the little Allen wrench right here, because when they're loose and you go to bite down on a piece of glass, you will break this versus the piece of glass. Now, some of the other ones have a flat edge here instead, and those work just as fine, and they are still glass nippers. So these are glass nippers. So you want to make sure that those are in the box. Another item that is going to be in your box is you are going to find you have a handful of pieces of paper. So you are going to have at least one template. So this is kind of a template piece. You're going to have another piece of paper that is black on one side, and that is graphite paper. So this one right here is graphite paper. And that is how we're going to trace an image onto other paper. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pause temporarily. And then there are going to be 2 more pieces of paper that you're going to have loose in your box. And these 2 pieces of paper, they are kiln shelf paper. Yours is not going to have a drawing on yours. Yours is going to be completely blank. But what I do want you to do is I want you to label both of these 2 pieces of paper. So you should have a long one that looks like this right here, and then you should have a shorter one. And when you're taking a look at it, you want to look at both sides. The side that you're going to label on is going to be the white side. So this one, again, you're not going to normally have that drawing on there. You are going to make sure that there is no logo on the back. So I'm going to get this kind of close. So that is the back side. And if you read the back side, it actually says this side down. So the side with the logos on it, when you're working with it, you want that side facing down, and you want the completely white side facing up. And to verify that you don't accidentally mess that up at a later date, what I want you to do is I want you to label it. So you're going to write feather kiln shelf paper on here. And you need to know that this is not any ordinary paper. It is actually resistant to the kiln and to heat. So if I were to take a regular piece of paper, put it inside a kiln, turn it on, get it up to 1500 degrees, regular paper would catch on fire. This paper won't. This paper protects the shelf from the glass that we're going to put on it. So you need to make sure that you have it and that you have labeled it so that it says, you know, feather kiln shelf paper, so that you know that that is the one for the feather. You are also going to have another one that you are going to label as the zebra. So zebra kiln shelf paper, and it's also called fire paper, but you want to make sure that you have it labeled. Again, make sure that the logo side is on the back and where you're labeling it is on the front. And so those 2 need to be labeled so that you don't forget at a later date and then start working with, you know, regular paper and then catch it on fire, because I will not be able to fire your piece. If I get your piece back and it's on a regular piece of paper, it just becomes garbage. And it's because I can't put it in a kiln. I have nothing I can do with it. So you want to make sure that you have labeled those 2. And then you are going to have another baggie of glass that's going to have little feet and stuff like that in it. And you will most likely have black glass in yours. Mine happens to have dark blue, which is fine. My zebra will be white and blue, no big deal. But this is going to be your zebra. And then you are going to have glass that is going to have a tiger. So this is your tiger right here. And this is all the glass that you should need for the tiger. And you should have another baggie of glass of little square pieces like this right here. So this glass right here is just all different kinds of things. And we're going to use this in order to make the feather that you have the template for. So that glass is generally going to be for these right here. And then you should have 3 other pieces of clear glass in your box. So when you're taking a look at the clear glass, one of the things I want you to do is I want you to find your biggest of all the pieces, and I want you to write tiger on it. So this particular one is for your tiger project. So don't chop it up. And then you're going to have a small one, and you are going to write nightlight on this small one right here. And then you should have another one that is going to be long and skinny. This long and skinny one is what we're going to practice with. So you can write practice across it. And this is the first one we're going to use. So I'm going to pull this one out. And then I'm going to put everything back into my box that I don't currently need. So that means I don't currently need my paper, my fire paper. I don't currently need my template for my feathers. I don't need my tiger or any of my other glass. I don't need the zebra. I don't need the tracing paper. The only things that I'm really going to, and I actually don't even need the nipping tools. The things that I am going to need when I get started is I'm going to need a Sharpie. I'm going to need my glass cutters. I'm going to need my running pliers. I'm going to need grosine pliers, and I'm going to need glue. And I'm going to need the long piece of glass. So those are the items that I'm going to need in order to get started with glass cutting, in order to start practicing the glass cutting procedures that we're going to do. And so right now I'm going to switch my camera so that you can see the glass piece, and I'll show you what I'm going to have you do after that. So give me 1 second. Okay. So hopefully you can see the piece of glass that is sitting there, and you can see I have my glue right there and my other pieces of glass. Now what we're going to do is we are going to end up drawing this image. Don't worry about the outside image. That's just the outside of my piece of glass. But we're going to draw this image right onto the glass. Now, if you were in the classroom, I would actually hand you this template and allow you to draw it just like this. But since you don't have the template, I'm just going to lay it right up there, and then I'm going to draw on it freehand, just like you guys would be doing. So you're just going to do a freehand. And when you're doing it, you want to break up the space and do the best job you can of kind of drawing these out and making them straight. It just makes your life easier when we get ready to cut. So I have that piece, and then I'm going to have a zigzag. Leave a little space between the lines. And then I'm going to have another straight line. And then I'm going to have kind of a little swoopy line. I'm going to have 2 more straight lines. And then I'm going to have a half moon and another half moon on one side, and then this one on the other side. So you can see mine are very similar to the drawing that I have right here. And that is what you're going to do with your Sharpie. So next thing that we're going to do is we are going to lay my tools down right there. Okay, so we are going to cut this piece of glass. When we're cutting this piece of glass, what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are cutting these straight pieces first, because they're going to be the easiest for us to cut. And what you want to do is you want to put the glass cutter right on the edge of the glass. And you can either go from the bottom and push up, or some people will go from the top and pull down. It really doesn't matter. But you do need, when you're cutting, you need to give it enough pressure that you're actually getting, it's a score sound. If we were to have oil in these, which these are actually intended to have oil, it actually makes that sound a lot less. However, as you can imagine, trying to get you guys all to work with oil without it getting all over the place was next to impossible. So you're going to have a little more of a scratchy sound. It'll sound like this. Now, if when you go to score that, like I just did, if you don't hear that sound, it may mean that you're not getting enough pressure as you're scoring. So some people, when they're scoring, it is a better idea that they stand up, because when they stand up, they naturally have enough pressure to score. Now, you don't want to push down really hard all the way across. And the reason for that is if you're pushing down really hard, you're actually giving it little shatters and it won't cut straight. The other thing you want to make sure is that you never go back and forth over a score line. The more times you go over that space right there, the more little cuts you're going to get and the less straight your cut is going to be in the end. So you want to make sure that you don't do that. Now we're going to grab our running pliers. And remember, the running pliers are the ones that are either going to have plastic or a little black tip up here, and they're going to have a line. And so what you want to do is running pliers do exactly what they sound like they're going to do. They're going to run along with that score line. And so you can see my score line sits here. It is on the top surface of the glass. And so I put my running pliers right on top of the line that I made, and then I'm going to push down. When I do that, it causes the glass to break. It actually literally will open the glass line where it is. It will take it from closed, where there's just the little score line at the tip, and it starts to pull it apart just like that. And that is how glass breaks. And so now that we've done this one, let's separate all the other straight lines from other pieces of glass. So I'm going to end up cutting this one right here. And this one right here, I've already done that one, but I'm also going to cut this one right here. And then I can go back with my running pliers and break all of those pieces so that when I'm cutting the rest of my glass, that I don't accidentally shatter pieces. Because when I'm doing a hard cut, like a zigzag, if I haven't separated all my pieces out when I do the zigzag, there would be a high likelihood that it would shatter on the way out, and we don't want that. So we're going to take all of these other pieces and we're going to start with some of our easier cuts. And so I'm actually going to work with this one first. And so when I'm looking at this one, what I notice is I have two cuts that are really close together. And what I want to do is I want to score that straight cut. And then I am going to take my running pliers and I'm going to push down. Now, chances are it is not going to break when I push down. And the reason for that is because remember how I have that frowny face? Well, there's pressure on this side of the glass due to the fact that this part goes down, but there's nothing to press on this side. And so therefore my glass is not opening up like I need it to. And so therefore, I'm going to hold my hand on the top of the glass as steady as I can without anything poking me. And then I'm going to grab my Grosine pliers. Remember, Grosine pliers are the crocodile smile face up. And then what I want to do is I want to put my Grosine pliers so that they are going with the line, but not in the same direction of line, but actually against that line. So my line is right there. And I'm holding the glass. And what I want to do is I want to pull down and out. So I want that glass piece to open up just like before. And then I want to pull it out at the same time. And when I do this, I need to make sure that I'm doing it and almost shocking that section of the glass. And so I always joke that it is like, it's very much like scaring a small child. when you're getting ready to scare a small child, and let's say you're hiding in the closet, and you get ready to jump out at them, you generally will build all your energy up all at one time, and then you'll jump out really fast. You would never ooze out of a closet. Well, when you're getting ready to cut this, you would never just start kind of pulling on it, because it's not going to break that line. So you have to pull down really quick and pull out really quick. And generally the line won't come off all at once, but it will come off in sections. So you hold down nice and tight, put your hand right here, and then you're going to pull down and out. And it came off all at once. That is really rare. If there are little pieces like this, you can go back and kind of break those little pieces off. Most of the time, it'll break off in 2 or 3 different sections. But if this is the section I'm wanting, I don't care about that extra piece. And so just remember that you're going down and out, and you're doing it at the exact same time. And I know it's seeming exaggerated, and it is, but you want to still go down and out. But I build all my pressure first. I go 1, 2, 3, down and out. Okay, so that is what you're trying to do. So there is that little piece that we broke away. We'll put that one up there. Now, before we go on to the little swooshy line, I'm going to go into and do this one right here. So if I were needing to keep this piece of glass for stained glass or something, and I needed to break these 2 out, I would want to make sure that I break these 2 out first before I do any other cuts. And the reason for that is these 2 are my most complicated cuts, and I would not want to make all my other cuts that I would need in order to do a shape. So like if this was a pattern piece, and I needed it to look like, where did I put my Sharpie? Let's say I needed to ended up looking like this in the end. That was a piece of glass that I needed to keep right here. I would want to make sure that I broke the hardest parts first. And that way, one, I have more glass to hold on to when I'm doing it. And if I were to screw it up and break it and it broke where I didn't want it to, then I would not have done a lot of work other places beforehand. So these are going to be the 2 that I want to cut out first. Now I'm going to start with this one right here. And it's because this is actually how I don't necessarily want you to do it. And so when you're cutting, you're going to follow the score line. And when I'm cutting, I generally will shift my glass more than anything else. And then I'm going to go off that edge. Now, the reason I say I don't want you to do it this way is because when I'm going to break this, chances are it is going to break way too far out here and way too far out there, because this is kind of a deep cut. But if I was going to do it, I would want to make sure that I put my grosing pliers right up against my line. So right here is one of my lines, and that is where my other line is. And then I would hold this side in my hand, and then I would do the same thing, down and out. Now, if you can see, I did a bunch of damage to my piece. So if I was needing this piece, this project would be not so great. I'd have to figure out if I could arrange another piece to fit in there better, or I would have to cut a whole new piece. So the way that we do it instead is we do 2 half moon cuts. And so I would do my first cut, and then I would actually do my second cut before I did anything else. And then when I go to break this, I'm going to go with that first cut, the closest one to the edge. And the reason for that is when I snap this line, it is automatically going to put a little bit of a fracture in my second line. And so I want to put my hand over the top just like I did before. So there's my first piece. And then when I go to do my second piece, you can see I got a really good line. There was hardly anything on the outside of this edge. You can see a little bit right there, but there was hardly anything. That would be easy to grind down and fix, where if I had this big chunk missing right there, I would be not a happy camper. So now that I've cut these 2 and you know that I'm going to go, I can grind the rest down and smooth that out. And now I can go back and I can cut any of my easier cuts. So that is what we use the Grosine pliers for. Grosine pliers are anytime we're going to make a complicated cut that is not more of a straight line, we would use our Grosine pliers. And I'll show you how to use a little bit more of those a little bit later. But I'm going to move this glass to the side. You do always want to make sure that you're keeping your table fairly clean, because if you don't, when you accidentally go to put your hand in it, you can put your hand in glass. And so I will generally have some kind of rag with me just to be able to sweep the glass off to the side. So now I'm going to do this one right here. So this would be my next least complicated cut. And then I told you earlier that when I'm making a cut, that I tend to make that cut, but I shift more of the glass. So I'm cutting forward, and you can see how I am shifting my glass back and forth. And that's because in my arm, there's actually not enough strength to twist and turn and like do this the entire time. Maybe if I was standing up, it would be easier, but sometimes it's just easier to twist your glass just a little bit. Now, when I get ready to break this, I would be more likely to use my running pliers. But if I go to break it just like it is, what's going to happen is it's going to try and break straight. It's not going to try and follow that little swooshy line that I have there. So in order to fix that swooshy line, I have a couple things that I can do. Now, some people will just grab it just like I am, and they will start tapping on the backside. And that works pretty well. But most of the time, still, if it's a really complicated cut like that, it's not going to break. But if I take it with my score line that is normally sitting on the top side and I flip it upside down, and then I go and I start tapping along that line, most of the time what happens is I will get a fracture in that line. And it's kind of like the same fracture that you would see if a rock hit your window. It's kind of a flash. And after I get it, I will hopefully show it to you. Okay, so I have one. And I think you can see there is a little flash right there. And that means that the glass is starting to break across that line. Now I can either keep tapping a little bit, or I can take this and kind of push down on it and try and get it to continue following that line. Now, if I tap too much or I am too rough with my taps, I will shatter the glass versus actually having it break like I want it to. Almost there. I can tell that I'm just about at that space. So if you take a look at it again, you can see that I have flash lines all the way across it. The only place I don't have a flash line is right up here. So I'm going to do it just a couple more times and see if I can get that flash line to continue going without breaking my glass. Okay, so I have it most of the way across. I still have that one section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my glass back over because you always want to use these with score line facing up. And I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on each end and hope that I can get it to start to come apart so that there we go, so that I could finish the cut. So you can see that that is a pretty complicated looking cut. And as long as I was gentle and I was trying to coax it, it worked. And I can't tell you that it'll work all the time, because sometimes, honestly, even I can't get it to break. But most of the time you can get it to break. Now, glass happens to be one of those things you cannot bully. You have to finesse it. You have to kind of keep working it and be gentle and keep going after it. Otherwise, it will not work. But you can see that one worked pretty nicely. So we're going to put those ones up there as proof that I did them. And they look pretty good. I'm actually really tickled with that one. So the next one we're going to do is we are going to do the zigzag. So we're going to do the same thing that we did before. And I'm going to start to go forward and then twist, get to a stopping spot, twist. and go all the way off. So just like before, I'm going to flip the glass over and I'm going to start tapping. Now I have you do this particular one, and the reason I have you guys try this is because this cut is honestly next to impossible. In fact, I used to think it was an absolutely impossible cut until one day I had a student that was just really patient, and he kept doing it and he ended up getting it to cut perfectly. Now, it is the reason that I have you try it, so it's a little bit of a challenge. If you do happen to get this one and you get a perfect cut, let me know and I'll give you extra credit for just being amazing. But even mine, generally, when I do it, it tends to break. And the reason it tends to break is whenever you stop cutting in the middle of the glass wants to continue running straight. Wherever you stopped at, it actually wants to continue breaking straight ahead. And that's what's going to happen most of the time. Sometimes if you are, following the little procedure and tapping nicely and just gently fracturing that piece, you can get it to work. We'll see. I can already see, I just got a flash that comes down in a different direction. So you can see how that flashed. And you can also see how that flash came right where I had cut. And so you can see all the other flashes, they're there. It looked like it might try and do it. And yet that one where I had stopped and turned in a different direction is where it's going to break first. So, and you can see the rest of it is starting to come apart as well. So that's just a thing. And again, if you do happen to get this one, let me know and I will give you extra credit for being an amazing glass cutter and trying it. Okay, so the last two that we have are going to start to be our shapes. Up to this point, if everything shattered, that, is fine because we're just learning. One, if it all shatters, we're just learning, so that's okay. Now on this one, we're going to do the circle. Now, when you're doing a circle, you always want to cut, well, anytime you're making any cut of a shape, you want to cut from one edge to the other, meaning I would start here, and then I would cut around this edge, and then I need to go off the glass in another space because I already showed you with the zigzag, if I were to stop someplace in the center, it is more likely to continue cracking whichever way it wants to. After I cut that piece, I would start again just on this side of where I ended, and then I would go around and cut again and go off the glass. And then I would do it again. And I'm just kind of crossing over that same space where I had ended, and then where I start again. And that way I know I am getting a nice clean cut on all sides. So that is how I'm going to cut it all the way around. And then just like all the other ones, I tend to shift my glass more than I shift my hand. And so I'm going to go across and go off that edge, come back, go off. And I am trying to make sure that I am going circular. So sometimes when you guys first start doing this, you struggle with actually doing a circular cut. And so, but you're trying to make a circle, and you're trying to make your circle as round as possible. Now that I've done all of that, what I want to do is I want to take my running pliers. And I know you say, hey, that's a complicated cut. Why would you use your running pliers? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my running pliers on the line, but one side is going to be on the edge of the glass and the other side is going to be in the center. And that way there's enough glass on each side in order to break the pieces apart. And so I go all the way around. Now, if you're looking at it, you're like, that's a bad circle. What were you thinking? But what I'm going to do is I'm now going to do cleanup. And when I do cleanup, I do it with my Grosine pliers. Again, crocodile face up. And then because that glass is already broken in those edges, all I have to do is start breaking it. Now, the truth is, this is probably going to be the messiest job that you have as far as when we're cutting glass. So if you're looking at it and glass is going flying, know that most of the things we are going to do are not going to be as messy as this, but this particular one is pretty messy. And so you're going to just keep cutting all the way around. And after this particular lesson, you are going to definitely want to vacuum, because this is the one, whenever I have a piece flying that I can't find, it is because I was just doing this activity right here. Now, if we were in the classroom, you would do this, and then you would afterwards, you would go back through and you would get to a grinder. We have grinders in the classroom. They're like these great big automatic sanders, except for they're for glass, meaning they have water in them. And then we would go through and we'd grind those edges and try and make them so that they were nice and round. But you can see I'm starting to get a pretty good circle out of that. So I might want to go through and do, you know, just a little bit of cleanup, and just be gentle as I'm going around. But you want to get the best circle that you can possibly get out of this, especially since this is practice. But there's my circle. So another one down. And then the next one I'm going to do, and it's the last one for this particular lesson, is I'm going to do the heart. Now, with the heart, for the most part, you already know what you're doing. So you're going to start, I generally start from the bottom, and I'm going to go all the way up. And I tend to go all the way around, all the way up to the other side. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Now, if you go off the edge right here, that's fine, but you would just want to pick up back here a little bit and then go around. Now, what I don't do is I never do anything on the inside where the heart comes down. I don't do that part yet. I do everything else first. And the reason for that is I want to make sure that everything that I'm doing is staying pretty solid. And that means I would have less likely that if when I was doing what I just did, which was breaking all the pieces apart, that this crack right here would run. And so I would do that. And then I would go back through with my Grosine pliers. So I just worked with my running pliers, and I would go back through and I would get rid of any of those weird little points that I kind of got on the edges of my heart. Clean up the edges of my heart a little bit. Okay, so now here is the trick to a heart. So I used to say you could not make a heart in glass either, but it turns out that I was wrong, because what you're going to do in order to make a heart is you are going to put your finger right at the very tip of your heart. Then you're going to take your your glass cutter, and you are going to start to cut. And when you go in, you're going to run into that finger. And then you're going to go in from the other side, and you're going to run into that finger so that it touches right at the same location that you had stopped the first time. And that's what the finger is for your glass cutter to run into, so that you aren't accidentally overshooting it and coming way down here. So now that I've done that, I'm going to go back with my Grosine pliers, and I'm going to start nibbling off all that extra glass. Now, do keep in mind that this one has about a 70% rate of getting it done, which means it's about a 30% fail rate. But you're going to try it anyway. And this, again, using the Grosine pliers just like this, are the ones where you're going to get most of your glass pieces to shatter. And so after using Grosine pliers, you want to make sure you do a nice job cleaning up. Now that it's looking pretty good, I can go back through and do any of the other little pieces that I need to do. So if I wanted a nice, cute little heart in the center of a project, you can see that I would be able to do it. But just keep in mind, it's a little more complicated to do these advanced cuts. But you can see I'm getting a nice little shape. Maybe it's a little pokey on this one side. Maybe I'll fix that. Like the way this one looks. Okay, not bad. Okay, so now Now what, you ask? Now that you've chopped up all your glass, what do we need to do? Well, first, let's start putting our tools away. Make sure that your tools stay inside your little container, and that is so that it is less likely that little hands will get a hold of them. And so I'm going to put those guys right in there, and I'm going to put this away. And then what I want to do is I want to get a little Ziploc bag, and I want to put any of my extra glass, my big chunks inside that bag. And that is because I might be able to use those at a later date. So anything that is on the chunky side, we would put in here. And then anything that is on the table, that kind of shake or really small broken pieces, those we're going to either sweep or vacuum up. I generally start with the sweeping and then I go through and I vacuum up to make sure I'm not going to miss anything. But you are going to want to make sure that you are keeping the big chunks in order to be able to do our feather with it, because it is part of the feather that we're going to be doing. And then other than that, you have just learned how to cut glass your very first time. I hope that you were very successful and that you enjoyed it. Remember, if you cut yourself, put a Band-Aid on it, glass tends to bleed a lot longer than you would anticipate. And then when you're cleaning up, make sure you clean up kind of in a wide path, just because sometimes the little piece will go flying even further than what you anticipate. And then, but you have the towel. So as you're doing all your cleanup, make sure that you, when you're done, that you take that towel, put it in a plastic bag, and then shake everything out. Because the next time you come sit down, you're going to need that towel again. Towel again in order to be able to do the next section of our project. So that's everything, everyone. I hope you guys have a lovely day.